This video we're about to show you is from 3 years ago. Now, the gentleman standing behind the dais is Todd Gilbert, the former speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates. Right before he called on me, a certain gentleman
who is now the current
speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates got up and went on this just atrocious rant against Glenn Youngkin, basically saying he was a fake Christian, all the typical stuff we've heard before. And it just pissed me off. It just pissed me off. And so I got up and I said this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was asked by a colleague of mine on the other side of the aisle, someone I actually deeply respect, and she asked me, was I going to be nice this session? And I thought it was an interesting question. I don't particularly think of myself as an unnice person, but I can see how sometimes people would see that differently. But you know what I've never done, Mr. Speaker? I've never got on this floor and I've challenged the faith of an elected official because I disagreed with them on policy. I've never gone on this floor, Mr. Speaker, and suggested that the other side of the aisle were racist because they didn't agree with my particular policy positions. I've never suggested they were sexist because they didn't agree with my particular policy positions. But I'm keeping a running tally so far of this session. We're not very far into it. And almost every day, someone on the other side of the aisle either gets up and either subtly or comes right out and suggests that if you don't agree with them on policy, well, then you're not a Christian. You're a sexist. You're a bigot. You're a racist. But the moment someone actually stands up and says, wait a second, no, I'm not going to accept that. If you want to debate me on the merits of our particular policies, I am happy to have that discussion. But at the moment you claim, with no evidence other than we don't agree on a particular policy position, the moment you claim that that makes us racist or sexist or bigoted, Mr. Speaker, I've got news. This was tried during the election cycle. You had a lot of parents coming to their local elected officials asking questions about what was going on in their schools. And the initial response was, oh, it's not there. And then when they saw evidence that it was, based off of what their kids were coming home and saying to them, and they went back and reissued the concern, then they got told, oh, well, then you must be a racist. Because that has been the repeated narrative coming from certain members of the other side of the aisle. And there's been a lot of times where we've sat here politely and just took it. Mr. Speaker, not this time. I'm tired of it. My constituents are tired of it. Because when these claims are made, they're not just made against Governor Youngkin. They're not just made against us. They're made in part against the people that elected to send us here. And I don't know a single person in this chamber that I would define as racist or sexist or bigoted. We have very different ideas about how to get to particular end states where all Virginians can be happy, healthy, prosperous, and free. But just so I'm very clear, will I be nice this session? I would certainly like to be, but I'm not about to sit here and listen to that, Mr. Speaker, and then go home to my constituents and have them ask me, why didn't you stand up and defend us? So let's have a robust policy discussion. But if you're going to question the faith or the intentions of anybody that happens to disagree with you on policy, then you don't get to lecture us on compassion, tolerance, or an open debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of things that we discuss which are issues. One of them is inflationary monetary policy. And why is inflation so bad? Because the good old Federal Reserve can essentially wipe out your savings in a heartbeat. Now, you could invest exclusively in the stock market, and I think investing in the stock market is a good idea, but if you really want to hedge against all of the crazy stuff that the government can do, precious metals is a good place to look. I have been going down this journey of getting more educated on this process, and the people I trust to educate me on it is Lear Capital. We've looked at a lot of gold companies. There's a reason why we picked Lear, and there's two things in particular I want to mention. One is their 401k package, and the other is the fact that they will actually ship the gold, silver, or whatever precious metals you're looking for to your house, so you can have physical possession. In an era of debanking, having physical possession of something that can be used for currency that has intrinsic value, I think is very important. If you would like to learn more about what Lear can provide for you and your family, I encourage you to either go to nick4lear.com. That's Nick, the number 4, lear.com, or call them at 800-707-4575. That's 800-707-4575. You risk nothing by just calling them up and getting the free information packet that they offer. Go check them out. I was wrong about one thing on there. I was wrong on the part where I said that I don't know anybody in that chamber that's a racist, a sexist, or a bigot. Looking back on it now, no, I do know people that are bigoted.
In fact, most of them on the others, I would argue that most of them on the other side of the aisle are. And that's why they use that type of language. And I remember at the time thinking you were giving them way too much benefit of the doubt, because I remember at the time being like, well, I agree with everything in that speech except for not believing that people in that chamber are these things. It's just that I didn't think anybody was on the right. Anyone on the right was, but definitely every single person on the left, including the person you deeply respect who came up and asked if you were going to be nice.
Well,
anyway.
What was fascinating about that whole thing with the delegate that asked me if I was going to be nice was that her and I had always, gotten along pretty well. And then when I gave the gun speech in 2018, she treated me like garbage.
Yeah.
She treated me like
there.
garbage until we were in charge again. And then it was, Nick, are you going to be nice this session? Oh, because you might have a bill in my committee, right? Because you might have to get something out of the subcommittee that I chair, right? Now you want to be nice to me. Now I get to be a person again. Silence, scorn, and disdain for the past 2 years. But now you want to talk to me again. Now you want to ask me if I'm going to be nice. And it just goes, the reason why I brought that up is because that was 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago.
A lot has changed.
And the point is that I don't think as much has changed as I thought it had, right?
I think they were always that. They were always that. It's just they really began to reveal themselves.
What ended up happening is whenever these things were discussed, whenever the accusations were thrown out, I used to really feel this need to be able to answer the accusation. Because obviously I don't want to be thought of as that. I certainly don't want that to be true. And whenever somebody launches that kind of accusation, I felt like, insofar as we were arguing in good faith, provided that I presented sufficient evidence to demonstrate that I was not the thing that they were calling me, then they should change the nature of their accusation. Either change it to somebody else or withdraw it. Because that's what a person that's engaging in civil dialogue does once sufficient evidence has been demonstrated or brought to bear in order to prove that what you said was incorrect. And then you start to realize it has nothing to do with it being correct. It has everything to do with whether or not the accusation itself is effective. And again, I'm going to go back to this idea that after Charlie's death, my phone is blown up with either direct messages on Instagram or YouTube or whatnot saying, what do we do now? And we already saw my response to Don Scott, not just in this, but the response I gave to Don Scott after Charlie Kirk was murdered. And him coming back and saying, well, I like Nick Freitas, but he's wrong on this. And this isn't a war between diametrically opposed worldviews. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because there's no world where they're not willing to use state power in order to impose a whole variety of things that I can't accept. So what would you call that? If you want things that are willing to use state power to force me to either comply with it, or to subsidize it through my tax dollars, then at some point I have to say no. And again, he wants to play nice right now because one of ours got murdered by one of theirs. But within like a day, they were the real victims. And he was trashing Governor Youngkin. And he was trashing me. Because this isn't about, at least with him and with many of my colleagues, it was never about having a civil discussion. It was never about that. And I think it's really important. I want to make sure that we're clear on this. I still want to have like the sort of debates that Charlie Kirk was having with people. I still do want to talk to people who disagree with me on things and see if we can't resolve issues. The question is what sort of framework are we utilizing to have that discussion? Or do we have a neutral framework that we can both appeal to? And what sort of end state do we want? If we want entirely different end states and we can't agree on the framework on which to debate, what's the point?
I think your premise has to start with what is the purpose of this conversation? Because so far, we've treated things in the past like, oh, we're having a dialogue, a back and forth, and we can convince each other if we bring good evidence to bear. And I think the paradigm shift has taken place when we all just collectively realized, oh, wait a minute, they're not here to have a debate and change minds or any of that. They're here to score points. Mm-hmm. They're here to score points and to convince gullible people that are listening that this is really what you are. Because, just subconsciously, nobody wants to be the bad guy and nobody wants to be on the bad guy team, mm-hmm. right? And so as soon as we start labeling other people as the bad guy, mm-hmm. there's weak people among us who will automatically want to gravitate to the good guy. Yeah. And that's all they're doing. They are placating the weak-minded among everyone, among society. And they're trying to get them to have a subconscious click where they go, that's the good guy, that's the bad guy, I'm on good guy team. Yeah. Because that's about as deep as some people think.